Most people believe failure happens suddenly, like a big collapse or a dramatic mistake, but in reality failure is quiet, gradual, and invisible at first. It begins with wasted hours, delayed decisions, and the belief that there will always be more time later. Time feels unlimited when you are comfortable, and that illusion becomes the most dangerous trap. Days pass, weeks disappear, and goals slowly fade, not because of bad luck, but because time was treated casually instead of carefully. Comfort is another silent enemy. The human brain is designed to protect energy, not chase greatness. It looks for shortcuts, ease, and familiarity. Comfort feels safe, but it quietly removes pressure. Without pressure, urgency dies, and when urgency dies, action slows down. Dreams do not disappear overnight, they dissolve when comfort becomes a daily habit. The moment life feels good enough, growth stops asking for effort. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment or restriction, but in truth discipline is freedom. It is the ability to decide once and act repeatedly, even when emotions change. Motivation is unreliable because feelings rise and fall, but discipline stays when excitement leaves. People fail not because they lack motivation, but because they never train discipline as a daily practice. Small actions repeated with intention reshape the brain over time. Every delay teaches the mind a lesson. When action is postponed, the brain learns avoidance. When effort is skipped, comfort is rewarded. Over time, this pattern becomes identity. The person who once planned big things now plans tomorrow, then next week, then someday. Discipline breaks this cycle by demanding action before comfort, effort before excuses, and structure before mood. Consistency is the hidden advantage most people ignore. Intense effort for a short time feels impressive, but steady effort over time creates real change. Time multiplies whatever behavior is repeated. Small disciplined actions compound, while small delays accumulate into regret. The difference between success and failure is rarely intelligence, it is direction and repetition. When someone understands the value of time, behavior changes automatically. Time is not just hours on a clock, it is life being spent in pieces. Once this truth becomes clear, comfort loses its power and discipline becomes a choice, not a struggle. Those who win are not special, they are simply aware, intentional, and unwilling to trade their future for temporary ease. Failure is not mysterious. It follows patterns. And success does too. The question is not whether time will pass, but who you become while it does. Most people assume failure comes from a lack of intelligence, talent, or opportunity, but the real cause is far more ordinary and therefore more dangerous. Time is treated like an endless resource, something to be spent casually because tomorrow feels guaranteed. Hours dissolve into distractions, and intentions are postponed with the comforting thought that effort can always begin later. The mind underestimates how quickly small delays stack into years of unfinished plans. When time is misused, potential quietly leaks away, not through dramatic mistakes but through thousands of unnoticed choices. Each postponed action teaches the brain that urgency is optional, and over time that lesson becomes habit. The tragedy is not that people lack ability, but that they allow their most valuable resource to be spent without direction, and once time is spent, it never returns. Comfort deepens this problem by creating a soft environment where urgency struggles to survive. The human brain is wired to protect what feels safe, familiar, and pleasant. When life becomes comfortable enough, the need to stretch, struggle, and grow begins to fade. Comfort whispers that progress can wait because nothing feels immediately wrong. This sense of ease dulls awareness of slow decline, making stagnation feel like stability. Without discomfort, there is no signal to adapt, and without challenge, there is no reason to sharpen skills or expand capacity. Over time, comfort turns into a quiet cage, not by force but by persuasion, convincing people to choose what feels easy over what builds strength. Time misuse and comfort reinforce each other in subtle ways. Wasted time feels less painful when life is easy, and comfort feels more justified when there is always later to change. Together, they create a loop where urgency fades and discipline weakens. The cost is not immediate, which makes the pattern hard to notice. The real loss appears much later, when opportunities have passed and the gap between what was possible and what was achieved becomes visible. Breaking this cycle begins with awareness, recognizing that time is not neutral and comfort is not harmless. When time is treated as precious and comfort is questioned instead of obeyed, attention sharpens, choices become intentional, and growth becomes a daily practice rather than a distant plan. Environments. In modern life, that same wiring quietly pulls attention toward what feels easy, familiar, and immediately rewarding. Effort triggers resistance, and resistance often disguises itself as logic, delay, or distraction. The mind offers reasonable excuses to avoid strain, framing comfort as efficiency and avoidance as wisdom. Without training, this pattern becomes automatic, and automatic choices shape daily behavior. What begins as a small preference for ease slowly becomes a lifestyle of lowered standards, where growth feels optional and challenge feels unnecessary. The danger is not the pull toward comfort itself, but the lack of awareness that this pull is shaping decisions in the background. Training the mind to choose effort over ease does not happen through sudden inspiration. It happens through repeated exposure to small discomforts that build tolerance and control. When effort is practiced intentionally, the brain learns that difficulty is not a threat but a pathway to strength. This rewiring is gradual, and it begins with choosing the harder option when the easier one is available. Over time, the internal resistance softens, and the capacity to act without negotiation grows stronger. The mind becomes less reactive to discomfort and more responsive to purpose. This is not about harshness or self-punishment, but about teaching the nervous system that growth is safe, manageable, and within reach. Discipline often gets framed as a personality trait, something people either have or lack, but that belief quietly removes responsibility from daily choices. In reality, discipline is learned through structure, repetition, and patience. It develops when actions are decided in advance and carried out regardless of shifting emotion. Feelings fluctuate, energy rises and falls, but structure creates a steady rhythm that carries action forward. Each completed commitment strengthens trust with the self, and that trust becomes the foundation of consistency. Discipline grows through small promises kept, not grand intentions announced, and every follow-through adds weight to the next decision. When discipline is treated as a skill, setbacks become part of training rather than proof of failure. Missed days become feedback, not identity. The process becomes experimental, adjusting routines, refining environments, and removing friction that blocks follow-through. Over time, patterns replace willpower, and systems replace struggle. The mind no longer waits to feel ready before acting, because readiness is created by movement. With practice, effort feels less like resistance and more like alignment, and action becomes a natural response to intention. Every time action is delayed, the mind receives a subtle message that avoidance is acceptable. What feels like a harmless pause becomes a rehearsal for inaction. The brain learns patterns through repetition, and postponement is a pattern that strengthens quickly because it reduces immediate discomfort. Each delay lowers the emotional cost of delaying again, until hesitation feels natural and starting feels heavy. Over time, the threshold for effort rises, making even simple tasks feel demanding. This is how potential is quietly trained out of daily behavior. The issue is not the size of the task but the habit of stepping away from the moment when effort is required, allowing intention to dissolve into explanation. Avoidance reshapes identity in quiet ways. When action is repeatedly postponed, self-trust weakens, and confidence erodes without a clear cause. Plans are still made, but they feel less believable, because the mind remembers past delays even when the conscious mind forgets. This internal mismatch creates friction, where goals exist but momentum does not. The longer this pattern continues, the more the future feels abstract and the present feels dominant. Breaking the loop requires interrupting the moment of hesitation with a small, immediate step that restores movement. Action, even minimal action, retrains the mind to associate effort with relief rather than threat. Intensity is seductive because it feels meaningful. A burst of effort creates the illusion of progress, but without continuity, it fades into memory without changing behavior. Consistency works differently. It builds reliability through small, repeatable actions that fit into real life. The brain adapts to patterns it sees daily, and steady routines shape identity more deeply than occasional surges of motivation. When actions are modest but regular, resistance lowers, because the cost of starting is small and predictable. This creates a rhythm where progress feels natural rather than forced. Over time, consistency compounds into confidence. Each small completion reinforces the belief that action is normal and follow-through is expected. The emotional drama around productivity fades, replaced by quiet reliability. This does not eliminate struggle, but it reduces negotiation. When consistency becomes the standard, decisions require less energy, because the pattern already exists. Progress becomes less about heroic effort and more about showing up in ordinary moments. This approach respects the limits of human energy while still producing growth. The path forward becomes steady, not because every day feels powerful, but because the direction remains stable. Short-term pleasure feels harmless because it offers immediate relief from pressure. The mind gravitates toward quick rewards since they provide fast comfort without demanding effort. Over time, this pattern teaches the brain to expect ease as a default response to stress. Small indulgences become routines, and routines quietly shape priorities. What is chosen in moments of fatigue or boredom slowly becomes the standard way of coping. The cost is not felt in the moment because the reward is instant, while the consequence is distant. This distance weakens awareness, allowing habits to form that trade long-term strength for short-term soothing. The danger lies not in pleasure itself, but in allowing pleasure to replace effort as the primary response to discomfort. When short-term reward becomes the main coping strategy, patience weakens and tolerance for effort declines. The nervous system adapts to rapid stimulation and begins to resist slower forms of progress. Tasks that require sustained attention feel heavier, not because they are harder, but because the mind has been trained to seek faster relief. This training reshapes attention, shortening focus and narrowing the range of actions that feel rewarding. Over time, growth feels less appealing than escape, and the gap between intention and behavior widens. Reversing this pattern begins with creating space between impulse and action, allowing a pause where choice can return. Even brief delays before reward rebuild the capacity to choose effort over ease. Awareness of time changes behavior because it reframes everyday choices as investments rather than moments. When time is seen as life being spent in pieces, attention sharpens. Ordinary actions gain weight, and small decisions feel connected to long-term direction. This awareness interrupts automatic behavior, making it harder to drift through routines without intention. The mind begins to notice patterns of waste and patterns of care, not with judgment but with clarity. With clarity comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes agency. Time becomes something to steward rather than something to pass through. As awareness grows, priorities naturally reorganize. Distractions lose some of their pull, and meaningful actions gain presence. This shift does not require constant pressure, but it does require honesty about how moments are used. When each day is viewed as a collection of choices that shape direction, behavior aligns more easily with purpose. The result is not perfection, but a steady movement toward what matters. With practice, awareness becomes a lens through which decisions are made, and the quiet power of intentional time use reshapes the path ahead.